Honorable Speaker, Honorable Prime Minister, Honorable Cabinet Ministers and Assistant Ministers, the Honorable Leader of the Opposition, Honorable Members of Parliament. I rise to support the motion by the Honorable Prime Minister and listen to the address delivered by His Excellency the President at the opening of the 2026 session of Parliament. Mr. Speaker, sir, I wish to echo and support His Excellency in acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land in which we gather today, and for the decades that this seat of government has been established here in Suba. I join His Excellency in paying respect to the Vanua of Nandurmai and to the Turanga, the Tuisuba. I acknowledge His Excellency for outlining the government's legislative priorities and policy direction for the year ahead and beyond. The address was reflective in tone, grounded in history, and forward-looking in ambition. It called for unity, resilience, integrity, and shared responsibility. These are aspirations that every member of this House can support. Mr. Speaker, sir, His Excellency invited us to reflect on our shared journey as a nation, from the deed of cession through independence in 1970 to present day. This reflection on our history is not merely ceremonial, it is instructive, offering guidance as we navigate the challenges of today and tomorrow. His Excellency reiterates and calls for unity despite our diversity in such a time where there is uncertainty at the global and regional levels. Mr. Speaker, sir, I fully align with His Excellency's emphasis on the vital role of collaboration in driving national progress. True development depends on strong partnerships among landowners, government, the private sector, and development partners built on transparency, trust, and a shared long-term vision. The Tauke concept of Saindoko na Kari-Kari, which His Excellency has repeatedly drawn our attention to, aptly captures the kind of leadership our nation requires, and this is critical juncture. At this critical juncture, it calls for courage, accountability and unity, leadership, and accepts the burden not reluctantly, but with resolve and clarity of the purpose in service of the nation. Mr. Speaker, sir, traditional leaders are central to this effort. They must guide communities with clarity and foresight, foster innovation, and ensure that land and sea resources are utilized purposefully while safeguarding our culture and identity. Through principled leadership and strategic partnerships, the Tauke institutions must seize the moment without delay. When land and resources are used aligned with national priorities, it becomes a foundation for resilience, dignity, and shared prosperity. I also believe that the government should also take heed of the needs of the people, respecting cultural context in which development is to progress. Nevertheless, there must be strong leadership and good governance in any community, in villages as well as settlements that are governed by district advisory councillors and special administrators in the case of municipal councils. These are crucial factors for any development, whether it be national, divisional, provincial, district, or community. Mr. Speaker, sir, for this reason, I wish to acknowledge His Excellency's recognition of the crucial role that our rural and maritime communities play in advancing national development. Mr. Speaker, sir, as rightly mentioned by His Excellency, rural and maritime development must no longer be relegated to the margins of national planning and should no longer be viewed as secondary or approached as fragmented, standalone community initiatives, a tendency that has persisted since the colonial era. Instead, rural and maritime development must be embedded at the core of our national strategy with sustained investment and coordinated planning. I echo the late H.E Ratu Naiqama Lalabalavu, former Prime Minister of Fiji, Ratu Naiqama, and I quote, "The development of rural areas is a solid measure of the progress of the nation." This speaks to a fundamental truth. A country's progress cannot be judged solely by growth of cities or size of its GDP. Mr. Speaker, sir, true national progress is reflected in the living standards of those living in our villages, settlements, and maritime islands, where access to roads, clean water, electricity, healthcare, education, markets determines whether opportunity is shared equitably. These areas are home to the majority of our people, custodians of our land and cultural heritage, and vital contributors to our economy through agriculture, fisheries, and natural resources. When rural communities thrive, when farmers can access value chains, when young people can find livelihoods close to home, when basic services are reliable and resilient, then development is balanced and inclusive. Therefore, investing in rural development is not charity or peripheral policy. It is a clear and measurable indicator of whether our growth is just sustainable and truly national in character. Mr. Speaker, sir, your Ministry of Rural and Maritime Development and Disaster Risk Management plays a central role in turning this principle into reality by ensuring that development reaches the most remote and undeserved communities. Through our 7 development programs, the Ministry prioritizes the following areas: infrastructure development, water and sanitation access, improved access to rural housing, enhanced economic livelihoods. Mr. Speaker, sir, His Excellency clearly positions the primary sectors, agriculture, fisheries, forestry, and our broader natural resources as central to rural transformation and national resilience. The speech affirms these sectors as vital to livelihoods and food security, focusing on climate-smart practices, better water and land management, while shifting from raw commodity exports towards value addition and innovation to retain more wealth and jobs locally. Mr. Speaker, sir, the Rural and Outer Island Program of the Ministry endeavors to create this enabling space for resource owners, actively improving rural farm access and infrastructure, as well as supporting rural producers with technical assistance and agricultural implements to boost productivity. Through a Rural and Outer Island Program, a total of 54 community farm access roads spanning 270.8 kilometers have been constructed nationwide, of which 134.5 kilometers in the Northern Division, 54.9 kilometers in the Western Division, 54.4 kilometers in the Central Division, and 27 kilometers in the Eastern Division. These investments are intended to improve reaches to markets, services, and opportunities for rural farmers and communities. Mr. Speaker, sir, as part of this strategy, construction has commenced on 2 agricultural processing facilities in Ngau, focusing on Angona and cassava processing. Similarly, fisheries processing facilities in Lakemba and Vio Island will enable our fisherfolk to transition into commercial operations, improve product quality, and access higher value markets. These initiatives are designed to establish rural manufacturing hubs that add value to local resources, strengthen export growth, and create niche markets within Fiji. Above all, they aim to empower rural communities, create employment, and build resilient local economies. Mr. Speaker, sir, I echo the sentiment shared by His Excellency that we recognize the private sector as the engine for growth in our country. In all the ministries' programs that I have mentioned above, we would not be progressing without the engagement of private sector companies and business to construct roads and buildings, build or supply boats and engines, supply materials for our rural housing assistance program, and so on. This is promoting public-private partnership at community level. Mr. Speaker, sir, I appreciate His Excellency's profound statement that there will be special emphasis placed on empowering interior, rural, and maritime economies so that development reaches every province and island. Mr. Speaker, sir, our ministry is committed to support resource-based sectors for economic diversification and value addition. These are important for our rural, remote, as well as maritime communities to unlock a great potential and open up doors of opportunities. To unlock we are gradually expanding our service delivery in this space through our Rural and Outer Island program, but we are treading cautiously as we try to fully understand the underlying principles that will enable successful small business to flourish, to become exporters through the rural and maritime development value chain framework. Mr. Speaker, sir, we cannot progress without also giving due consideration to building the human resource capital for our nation. Investing in our children and the education system is critical if we have to ensure that future growth is sustainable. We must recognize the talents and skill sets that would necessitate this. I totally support the prioritization given to review the Education Act and the holistic review of our education system and the approach being adopted to reduce barriers for learners, particularly in the interior, rural and maritime areas. It is common knowledge that our rural children migrate to urban areas for better school opportunities and to pursue their career dreams. With technology available, Mr. Speaker, sir, I hope that our education institutions will soon set up satellite institutions in the maritime islands that will enable children of the Lau group remain in the islands and be able to pursue diploma and degree programs without having to relocate to Suva and never return home until after 1 or 2 decades. They could remain in the islands and still live a healthy lifestyle and contribute to the economic growth of their village, Tikina, and province. Whilst I know that this requires a collaborative effort of all the key stakeholders, I believe that this dream is achievable but requires shared vision and commitment. Mr. Speaker, sir, His Excellency reminds us that development is a collective endeavor, dependent on the collaboration of every sector of our nation. Our ministry continues to strengthen partnerships with these stakeholders through coordination, dialogue, and resource sharing on the ground. As the ministry advances the finalization of the National Rural Development Policy consultations across sectors and committees have consistently underscored the need for stronger collaboration and coordination among all stakeholders. This reflects the very essence of the policy that development partners must work collectively rather than in isolation, sharing responsibilities and resources to achieve common goals. Such an integrated approach will lay the foundation for inclusivity, sustainability, and long-term national transformation. It would be remiss of me, Mr. Speaker, sir, not to acknowledge the various partners, regional and international, that continue to show their commitment to improving the lives of our people. UNDP, through the Governance for Resilience program, in providing support in improving communication network, advancing work on minimum standard designs for our infrastructure projects, technical and financial support in advancing the National Rural Development Policy, International Organization for Migration, IOM, and Korea International Cooperation Agency, KOICA, for their support in constructing 4 new evacuation centers, to name a few. Just before I conclude, Mr. Speaker, sir, I just want to highlight a few areas that caught my attention whilst going through the responses from the leader of the opposition to the presidential addresses, right from 2023, 2024, 2025, and 2026, the current one. The main source of my materials are from the Hansard report, and I believe that the one yesterday is still in the draft form. The leader of the opposition then, in 2023, began his attack on government and His Excellency the President right from the very start of his contribution. And he was full of anger and animosity. He was just like someone who cannot accept defeat and was trying his best to hang on to power, either by hook or by crook. I only hope that that type of leadership does not come back to haunt this parliament again in the future. Mr. Speaker, sir, this is not so with the current leader of the opposition, where his response to the presidential address in 2025 mentioned in the United Kingdom, the leader of the opposition is sometimes referred to as the leader of His Majesty's most loyal opposition, depicting that the opposition was not considered an enemy nor disloyal to anyone, but they play a very important role in any constitutional democracy. He went on to say that we, the opposition, will endeavor to work with government on matters that unite us as a nation. However, just listening to some commentaries from that side of the House in yesterday and today's deliberation, there seems to be a lot of finger pointing and, to some extent, contributions deeply rooted in personal and political vendetta. And I want to remind them that when you point a finger at your neighbor, 3 more pointing back at you. Very important. A proverb reminding us that when accusing or criticizing others, your own flaws and shortcomings are often exposed. In closing, Mr. Speaker, sir, I thank His Excellency for a very inspiring address, and I thank you for the opportunity to contribute in the debate this afternoon. Thank you very much.